going? Trent Freer here, just out on the water. I thought I'd do a quick video on how to adjust your spool speed for whatever lure you're casting to eliminate bird's nests. So here we go. This reel is a low profile bait cast reel. There are two different styles. You've got your barrel style and your low profile style, but this works for both. Just give you a rundown on the reel. On your handle side, underneath your handle you'll have a star drag. That's to tighten the tension of your drag, and under that you have a little knob. If you can see that, this one's got a red one, some have got silver, some have got gold, but they're all the same, and that will tighten and loosen how fast your spool will go. Underneath your spool you've got a button there that releases your spool, so it goes into free spool. And on your other side you'll have a dial. Usually they go from 1 to 10, this one happens to go from 0 to 20, and that's just a magnetic drag to fine tune how fast your spool will actually go. So rightio, I'll just change camera angles now, and then we'll just go for a rundown on how to adjust it for what lure you're going to be casting. Rightio, I've got two different examples of lures, Jackal TN70, and this is a JD 140mm Python. The weight difference is a lot, so when you're casting these on your reel, you're going to need to adjust it, otherwise you'll end up with a lot of bird nests. And this is what this video is all about, trying to eliminate all them bird nests for people that are out there that are struggling with them. So we've got our lure attached. Rightio, to the reel. We've got our lure on now. We've got the Jackal TN70, and this is our spool adjustment knob. So if we turn that right or clockwise, it will tighten, and if you do it left and anti-clockwise, it will loosen. And to find out what you need by how much pressure you need to tighten or loosen it, it's just you push down your release button and just keep your thumb on the spool, but just let it go and then let it drop. Now if that's dropping too quickly and you cast that out, that 9 times out of 10, unless you've been using a Baitcaster for a long time and you've got the technique of thumbing the spool and feathering it, slowing down, which I'll show you a little bit later, it will bird nest. So all we do is tighten that knob. So tighten that clockwise or to your right, hold the button in, and now look, the lure is at a complete stop. So all we need to do is loosen that spool, dial back, so we're loosen, like letting it loose, and then just find the happy medium where that lure is slowly going down. There we go. So now we've got that going slow. This should be right to cast. And if we do have a little bit of a problem with our cast and we get a bit of backlash, or the line fills up a little bit too quick and you can feel it under your finger, that's when we use this side dial, and that will do an in-between tension from this one and fine tune it. So we'll just cast it out now. We'll get plenty of distance and no backlash or no bird nest whatsoever. Yeah, for all those people that are just starting out, if you tighten this spool up to a point where that lure is only just slowly going down, or just not at all, it doesn't matter how hard you cast it, it will not bird nest on you. So it is important to remember, after you have cast it out, make sure that you stop the spool as you progress and loosen off that spool, so you don't get any like overrun on your spool, which will entail for a nice bird nest. But how I've got it set now, should be able to hit that, it hits the water and the spool stopped for me. So I've got that tuned in right now, so I can give it the hardest throw that I can possibly do. I can let it hit the water without even touching the spool, and there'll be no bird nests. And then as you progress and get better at casting, obviously you can loosen that spool up and then you'll get further distance, but it's all about controlling the line as it's coming off. And it's coming off, you just lightly have your thumb there so you can feel what the line's doing, and just before it hits the water, stop it with your thumb, and then you'll have no dramas whatsoever. So just cast that one more time, show you, not holding it, and then the line stopped for me. I've got a fair bit of distance in that cast, so if I was just starting out, I'd be pretty happy with that. So you'll notice after a while, using different types of lures, that if you're using a majority of lures that are all pretty much the same weight, you won't have to adjust them at all. But for example, I've got that fairly light. For this lure, probably a little bit tighter than usual. And if I swap over to this JD Python and cast it with the way that the spool is set now, we'll show you what happens. Rightio. We've got the JD Eddy 140mm Python tied on now, a lot heavier lure. You can just feel the weight of that. It's a lot heftier. The reel's pretty much set up the same as the TN70. Now if we were to cast this without touching the spool at all, bang, we got an overrun, we got a backlash because we hadn't set our lure to our spool. So lucky, this time it wasn't a bad one. Yeah, we're lucky this time. It didn't make a big mess, but still, it overran. So the same as before. We've got our lure on. Hold the button in. Leave your thumb on the spool so it doesn't just run off. Just let it go just a little bit. It's falling very quickly. So we tighten up our spool until it stops. There we go. The lure has stopped. So you just want to ease that little bit by little bit until it starts to fall. Now notice it's falling fairly quick. Just dial it up a little bit tighter. And then there you go. So that's still falling fairly quickly. Now with your magnetic drag on the side, you can dial that up and that will fine tune it so it doesn't fall as fast. Now when we cast this lure, we should be fine, no bird nests. So I'll take my thumb off the spool, I won't feather it. And there we have it. That's just the easiest way when you're changing from heavier lures to lighter lures, vice versa, that you will not get bird nests. But to put in point, if you do go from a heavier lure to a lighter lure and you try to cast it, it won't go very far because your spool will be too tight for it. So now, as earlier as I talked about feathering the spool when it's coming off, and you will find yourself as you get better using baitcasters that you'll be able to leave the spool a lot looser than what is needed, so then you'll get more distance if you need. All it is as you let go of the lure to cast it and it's falling, you just leave a little bit of thumb pressure on that line as it's going out. Not enough to stop it, but just enough to let it free run, and then you'll keep the line compacted to the spool. So if I dial this out, so it's very loose, I take my magnetic drag off so there's no pressure from it either, so basically I will get a massive bird nest. If I just cast this out, leave my thumb on the spool, I'll have no dramas. And it's just a thing you can practice, but until you get to that point where you can feather your thumb on that spool as the line's coming out, the best way is to use your adjustment knob on the right hand side of your spool to put enough pressure on that spool for the lure that you're using, and then you won't even have to use your thumb at all, even as it hits the water. The only time that you probably will have to use your thumb is if you're casting around trees and you hit a bit of timber or a tree bang smack on, and your lure will go to a sudden stop, and then your line will have nowhere but to overrun and maybe get a bird nest.